Hi, welcome to the City Show. I'm your host, John Zimkus. Today we have two guests, and they both concern things that happen in the spring. The weather this last few weeks, there's been at least one day you felt like going out to the park, or you actually did that. And no better person to talk to about that than Casey Burdick, who is the Recreation and Natural Resource Coordinator for the city. Yeah. Welcome, Casey.
Thank you for having me on.
How are the parks in Lebanon? Are they in good shape?
We have made a lot of improvements over the last few years. Yes, in general. I think overall we have a great park system, and I hope people are starting to realize how many different parks we actually have.
Okay. And how many parks do we have, actual individual places?
So individually counted, we have 17. And they range from the very small parks in the downtown that are, we call 0.2 acres, like Christmas Tree Park or Gazebo Park next to the Golden Lamb, all the way up to our largest park is Colonial Park, and that's 130 plus acres.
Wow. Now, I know when the city got Harmon Park, which was well over 100 years ago, 110 years ago or so, it was rather unusual for a town that size to have a park that big. How are we compared to other cities our size in the number of parks we have?
I don't have a good count on what the other communities have, but I would say we are above average. We really do value green space here in Lebanon, and we have 700 acres of parks altogether in our community, so there's lots of opportunities for pretty much any sort of outdoor recreation you might be into.
And with new additions to the city, they almost always include some sort of park, don't they?
Correct. We do require green space anytime a new subdevelopment or anything goes in, even if it's just an extra strip of trees. Mm-hmm. So we definitely encourage that green part of any sort of development.
Now, in your position as the Natural Resource Coordinator, as well as recreations, do you have any say as to those green spaces?
We do have feedback, or an opportunity to feedback to those communities or to the development groups. We have a specific set of guidelines that they have to follow, a certain amount of trees and landscaping, things like that. The zoning department handles the first level of that, and then I get an opportunity to review to make sure that the trees they select are right for the area, that they aren't going to cause future problems, like, for example, something that might end up being invasive, like the pear trees that are now illegal to sell in the community. Mm-hmm. So yes, we try to make sure that it's going to be a good plant that will last a long time for whoever gets that property or moves into the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Now, with spring coming and here once a week or so, we've got a lot of things happening in the park system, don't we? What's coming up?
So we're gearing up for what I call Earth Month. So April has Earth Day and Arbor Day at the end of it. And we have a lot of fun things coming up, but we kind of kick off those months with volunteer events so we can get the parks really shined up and looking good for when it's time to start going out and actually having fun. So.
Now, I read that there's going to... on Wednesday, starting this month and going through September, there is the bike park has a volunteer thing on Wednesday nights.
Yes.
What do the volunteers do? What do you want for them to do?
So I'll be out there. We're there from 5 to 6:30, the third Wednesday of each month. And people can just come out and I will help them learn how to take care of the trails. So we focus mainly on the mountain bike trails. We do things like cutting back the honeysuckle and roses and things that might get out and grab you when you're riding or walking by. We try to prevent erosion. So anywhere where we've had all the rains over the winter months, where we're getting gullying in the trails, get those smoothed back out so that folks can safely ride out there. We do some weed eating, It's not necessarily glamorous stuff, but it really allows park users to enjoy the park when they are out there with their bikes.
You mentioned earlier invasive species, and then you mentioned honeysuckle. I saw there's something called the Honeysuckle Blitz. What's that?
So that's going to be a fun day. I mean, anything's fun if you are out there with people with a good humor about it. So at Harmon Park, as well as Colonial Park around what we call the French Run Trail, we're going to be working to cut back the honeysuckle in those parks. So again, we'll train anybody how to do this. Bring your own loppers or hand pruners and gloves. Any age can help as well. And what we're going to do is we're around the playground area at Harmon Park. We're going to go back through and cut back any of the new growth where we've done a lot of work there along the stream bank to help control the honeysuckle there so that people can actually get down to the stream and have some fun and check out flip rocks and see all the cool stuff in the stream as well. And then also at Colonial Park, we are trying to reopen the French Run Trail. So if people aren't aware, there's actually an almost 3-mile trail that cuts through all of the different parts of Colonial Park. So we want to get that back open and make people feel safe and increase the visibility around the trail so that, you know, it's you kind of know what's around you and you can feel comfortable on that trail.
Now, when does this take place? A particular day or?
So it's going to be on Earth Day itself, so April 22nd. We'll be working in the morning from 9 to noon, and folks can contact me and get on the list, and I'll assign you to a park, and we'll get you set up that day.
No, that's a Saturday, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Colonial Park, as you mentioned, is fairly big. Where do you get to the French Run Trail?
You could access it from any of the 4 entrances, actually. There's, the swinging bridge. I'm amazed by how many people don't know we have the swinging bridge. It's right behind the post office, and it leads to our new fishing pond, which a lot of people don't realize we have as well. That's actually on the French Run Trail. And then it cuts through Colonial West. It kind of goes through between the ball diamonds up to the top of the hill where folks watch fireworks every year. There's a trail that goes down through there, and it comes back up at Colonial North. And then there's another section that goes around to Colonial East. You get to cross the stream. Again, a great place to flip rocks. Kids love to go creeking, go and find different critters out there. That comes out in the parking lot for East. And then you can cut through. There's a strip of pine trees at the far end of Colonial East. And there's more trail that comes down, and it takes you back out right by the post office.
Now, is there parking by the post office?
There is parking back there, yes. It's around behind it, so you have to kind of go. It looks like a dead-end road, and it dead ends into the park there.
Now, there's also something, the only thing that stuck in my mind is the word hippie.
Oh, yeah.
Is that also on Earth Day?
That is on Earth Day.
And what is that?
So Mandy with Barefoot Hippie Homesteading, she's a great local person. That she has a small business where she does a lot of eco-friendly, conservation-type, small-scale work. And what she's doing is she's going to offer a program for kids and families more geared towards that end of things rather than doing the manual labor. Kids get kind of tired of cutting honeysuckle. So she has set up a great day where she's going to be giving away trees. She's going to talk about composting. And they're going to allow the kids to plant some marigolds in little pots they can take home. So it's just going to be a lot of fun for the kids particularly.
Now, where is that going to be? Miller Park?
That's going to be at Miller Eco Park.
Yeah.
So at our new Welcome Center. It'll be open.
Now, is that open?
It will be open by then.
Oh, good.
So the grand opening is actually scheduled for the end of March here.
Okay. And what does the Welcome Center have?
So it's primarily a restroom building with water fountain. And then there'll also be picnic tables. And at Miller Park, we try to have a monthly educational program. So that'll be the meeting spot for that program where we can sit down and do some education and then ideally get up and still go and walk and enjoy the park.
Now, speaking of Miller Ecological Park, they have a big celebration coming up in May.
Yes, so
What's
really excited about that. Much to my disbelief, Miller Park has been open 10 years as of May 12th. The event's on May 13th because it happened to fall on a Saturday. And we have so much fun stuff. We're going to have educational booths. Raptors Inc. is coming and doing a raptor show for the event. So that's always fun to see the birds flying.
So that's birds then, right?
Yes. So owls and falcons and hawks, and they'll bring a number of these and they'll have them fly around and show some of their hunting techniques, and really good education. And it's so fun to watch those animals do their thing.
And Miller Park is actually growing bits and pieces here and there. It's taking in new land, isn't it?
We're always looking for kind of some new opportunities where it makes sense. The original section of Miller Park is about 45 acres. And then a lot of people don't realize there's an opening and you can go back and there's another 54 acres back in that back section. So the park's just shy of 100 acres big.
Wow. Now, in those 10 years, it has developed greatly. I mean, the whole idea was to bring nature closer to the people, and it has done that, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
With things they planted and things they built, and now after 10 years, it's really making an impact on the natural aspect of the area. Now, is Miller Park, there's a committee running Miller Park. Is that a sort of a hybrid city private thing, or?
So how that works is the Miller family that sold the property to the city at a great discount originally, some of the descendants of the Miller family have set up a trust for that property. So it's a city park, but they kind of set up what I'll call a rainy day fund. So they are raising funds that if for some reason in the future the city comes on hard times, there will still be funds set aside for doing maintenance and keeping that park up and running.
I do know initially there was a committee or a commission. Does that still meet the Miller Park group?
Yes, we generally meet twice a month, every other month with the steering committee, and then the trustees meet twice a year.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Is there anything else going on in the park system or in the natural resources of Lebanon that we should be aware of?
Really excited. So probably at the end of April, early May, we are installing a new playground at Pleasant Square Park, right across from the post office. So the old equipment was old. I mean, it's 20 plus years old. So it was starting to show signs of wear, and bits have been falling off and things like that. So in order to make it safe, we're removing all of the old equipment and replacing it with new equipment. So there'll be a 2 to 5 year old play set, a 5 to 12 year old play set, and a new swing set, along with artificial turf. So that was so popular at Harmon Park, we decided that we would go ahead and install that artificial turf there as well.
Now, currently the playground equipment is in the south side of the park. Mm-hmm. Will the new equipment be in the same location? It'll
be roughly in that same area, and it will all be combined into one long strip along through there. The feedback we got from the neighborhood was that it's great to have the equipment, but if I have a younger child and an older child, it's really hard to watch both of them at the same time. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're combining them into one grouped play area, separated by the swings. So if the older kids are playing a little rougher, the little kids can still play and be safe.
Will there be benches or picnic tables where mom and dad can sit and watch the kids?
Oh yeah, we'll have benches in the area. So, it'll definitely be a facelift on that park.
Oh, great. Anything else we should be aware of?
I think that's a lot of what we kind of have going on for now. We have a lot more coming up this summer, but I don't want to overdo it and people will forget what I have coming up. So,
well, you'll have to come back and tell us again later this year.
That would be fantastic, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Casey. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And we'll be right back with our second guest in a moment. Welcome back. Now, we talked about spring in the parks, but something else that happens in spring, it's tax time. And Lebanon does have an income tax, which we need to pay to help Lebanon grow. And the person we're going to talk to today is Samantha Radicke, who is the income tax auditor for the city of Lebanon. Welcome, Samantha.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing quite well.
Good.
So, who has to file their income tax for Lebanon?
So all residents are actually required to file a tax return with the City of Lebanon. We do impose taxes to be filed for individuals who are under 18, and that might be working. And then also we also require individuals who are not working to file a tax return, as well as the working individuals that file. Businesses inside the city limits are required to file a tax return as well. There's only 2 exceptions to the filing requirement. We do allow retirees to be exempt from filing and people who are on disability. So SSI individuals also are exempt from filing.
Okay. And what percentage of their income goes to Lebanon income tax?
So our tax rate is 1%. So 1% of their income is subject to the Lebanon tax.
And when is it due?
This year is a little unique. So the due date is April 18th, 2023. Normally, as most know, it's April 15th, but we've moved it to the 18th this year because that's what the federal and state have moved it to, due to the 15th being on a Saturday, and they've moved it to Tuesday, the April 18th.
Okay. Now, how does someone file their income tax to Lebanon?
So we have a couple different options for residents where we do not have electronic filing. A lot of people choose to come in the office during normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. We really like that option because it's more personable. We can prepare their tax return right on the spot for them. And of course, that's at no cost to the residents. A lot of our residents choose to have their taxes prepared by a CPA or tax professional, but we do that at no cost as well. So we always like to remind people that we can prepare the tax return and they can come in the office and file. We do have a drop box that is utilized mainly for utility payments and the utility department, but as long as they put tax department on that, there's a drop box behind our building that's open all the time, 24/7. And then we also, a lot of people choose to mail in their tax documents. We do ask because the mail, can have delays with tax documents. If they send it via mail, try to send it certified. That way they get a receipt, so that way they don't have any late filing fees. And then we just recently have a electronic submission through our online portal. So you can register with an email address and password on our website. And from there, you can just upload your documents to us, and then we can print them and then prepare them and mail them out.
Now, do you need an appointment to have the city help you prepare your taxes?
Appointments are not required. They are very helpful, though, because around tax season, we definitely have several people in line, so we get a little busy. And the appointment just guarantees that their appointment is going to be at that date and time, and then they don't have to wait in the long lines. So walk-ins are welcome, but we do have the appointments for those who just want to get in and out. We have somebody in our office that handles the appointments only, so that way they don't have to, because sometimes our lines can be an hour wait, depending on how long, how much closer we are to the deadline. The closer we get to the deadline, we definitely have longer wait times.
How many people in the office are there to help people with their taxes?
So we have 2 tax auditors that sit at the front. Ironically, we're both named Samantha, so that makes things really nice and easy. And then my supervisor is Elizabeth. She handles a lot of the tax appointments. And then Lebanon's really great about cross-training. So we have 2 others that are in the finance department who have worked in tax. So they also help when we get closer to the tax deadline. So we're up to 5 with their help that actually prepare the returns. And then we have several others in the building that don't necessarily prepare and file the tax returns, but they're doing other things like helping with the lines and managing the lines and maybe collecting payments and stamping their paperwork for drop-offs and making copies. And then we also have somebody who is in payroll that used to be in tax, and she is able to work on some of the mail that we get because we get a lot of mail, so she can help process that so our attention can be at the front. So a lot of cross-training that allows us, I think, to be pretty efficient with the tax department.
How long does the average meeting with the tax auditor take place?
Okay.
Is it long, short?
It varies. If somebody is just a W-2 employee and they don't have any additional income, our system is really quick, so we can get somebody out within 10 minutes pretty easily. Things that usually prolong the process is if they are a partial year resident, meaning they've moved in or moved out at some point during the year, we prorate their tax return, and by doing that, we just take the days in that they're in the city versus the days worked or days out, and we just use that percentage to calculate what is actually taxable to us, because if they weren't a full year resident, we don't want to tax their income at 100%. So those ones take a little bit longer, and then there are other individuals that have self-employment, rental property that become taxable to the city, and they can take a little bit longer depending on how many properties they might have.
Now, with that in mind, the partial being a citizen or being here, say someone's in construction and, for 3 months they're in this town working, and for 3 months they're in that town. Every time they work someplace else, that changes that, doesn't it?
It does. So you're required to pay the tax where you're performing the work. So a lot of people who are in construction are 1099 employees, so they don't necessarily get a W-2. They become a self-employed, and then that goes on a Schedule C when they file the federal return. And then we take a look at the Schedule C, and if they have a certain amount, once we take their net, so once they can write off all of their expenses and deductions, we'll just tax that net amount. However, if they're filing with another city because maybe they did work in another city like Monroe or Mason, any neighboring cities, and part of that was taxable to them, we'll still give them the 0.5% credit on that. But as a resident, 100% of their income is still taxable to Lebanon.
Now, with COVID the last few years, an awful lot of people are working from home. How does that change the city income tax?
So that is a big topic in the tax world right now. We have a quarterly meeting, we call it SWOTA, for all of the other municipalities locally, and we kind of meet together and talk and discuss topics. And this has been a big one that we have discussed lately, just to see how other departments are doing and other municipalities are handling the work from home process, because there's two different things that go into that. A lot of people are seeing some refunds because they're incorrectly being withheld. So maybe they were working in Mason, but they live here and they work remote, but taxes maybe were still being withheld for Mason. They are entitled to a refund for Mason because they weren't actually performing the work in Mason. So they can request a refund for any taxes that might have been incorrectly withheld. And vice versa, if they don't live here and they were working here, or their principal place of business was here, and then all of a sudden during COVID they started working remote, and say they're a resident in Monroe, then at that point we would owe them a refund because they shouldn't have been withheld for Lebanon. So the remote world has definitely taken off, and we've seen a huge increase in remote workers for sure. And we just kind of educate people when they come in, what they're required to do, what they're required to be withheld, and if they should or should not be due a refund for other cities. And we kind of help them navigate. I've been able to go onto these websites for these other cities and print them. At Lebanon, it's called a non-resident refund request, so they can just submit the non-resident refund request and get that refunded. But in theory, if they're working from home, they're required to have that tax withheld where they're working, which is their remote location.
Now, even though their company may be withdrawing their local tax, they still have to submit a Lebanon tax form.
If they're a resident, they are still required to file, because even if their taxes are being withheld, there's some confusion because they might not think that they're required to file. However, when a company sends us these withholding payments for their individuals or their employees, the company just gives us a big lump payment and says, here's, all the withholding payments that we withheld for Lebanon for these employees. And we don't know who how to distribute that. We don't know what percentage goes to this individual. So that's why it's crucial to file, because the W-2 that they provide us when they file their tax return will allow us to then take all of the money we receive from those withholdings and give them the proper credits that they should have. So that's why it's really important to file.
What would happen if an individual doesn't file that? He thinks the company is withholding and he thinks everything is fine and they don't file. Is there a penalty?
There is. We follow suit with what the state does. So our late filing fees are $25 for every month that they're late. And as of right now, they we do put a cap at $150. So we do stop it at $150. So that's the maximum penalty you can have on each tax return for each year. So if somebody's 4 or 5 years behind, it can definitely pile up. Lebanon does a great job at making sure we send notices to these individuals, just reminding them that they've not filed a tax return yet, because we understand there is some confusion. So we try really hard at the beginning of the year, before the deadline even approaches, we send postcard reminders saying, this is the due date, don't forget that you need to file, and so forth. And we also, when we get reconciliations from these employers, if there is a W-2 that they've given us that maybe we don't have an account for, we'll send them a letter saying, hey, your employer let us know you are working inside the city limits. You're required to file a tax return. So we do a good job at letting our residents know if they're required to file or not.
Now, the working at home because of COVID probably has cut down the money large cities are getting, but cities like Lebanon probably have increased in the taxes they collect because people working at home.
I would say that that's a pretty fair statement, just because the larger cities, they are seeing probably a reduced amount of individuals that are actually working at the business or the facility. They are still getting, of course, the money from the net profit return, which is just what the business files, because just because they work remotely doesn't mean the business itself needs to file within that municipality, because at that point they don't necessarily have nexus over that in that city, just only where the, I guess, profits are being earned. So we as Lebanon, where we're smaller, I think it's not affected us too much. I think we've definitely seen an increase in withholding accounts that are being created for the remote workers, for sure. So I think Lebanon has seen a little bit of an increase in that.
What does somebody have to send in with their tax? What forms are needed?
Depending on their circumstances, we generally always require the first page of the federal 1040. For residents, for senior residents who file a senior tax form with the IRS, they actually have to submit page 1 and 2. But for the most part, it's the federal 1040, which is what they file with the IRS. If they are working for an employer, they're required to also submit their W-2s. And if they are self-employed, they do also need to send in a federal Schedule 1, federal Schedule C, and federal Schedule E. And then there are some things that are taxable that might not be like just ordinary on a normal tax year. One I saw this morning actually was some gambling earnings, so that is taxable to the city. Mm-hmm. So we require the federal Schedule 1 to show what that additional income is, so we can determine if it's taxable or not. Unemployment shows up on a Schedule 1, so if somebody had any unemployment wages, we do not tax unemployment, but we do need to see the federal Schedule 1 that shows what that income is, so that way we don't tax it. So sometimes we request a lot of documents just to make sure we're doing the right thing and taxing the right things that we're supposed to tax. So we might require additional documents, but it's usually just the W-2 and the federal 1040.
Now, if a citizen needs help filing, but they can't make it to the city building during business hours, what can they do?
So the drop box comes in handy. That is the one that's behind our building in the alleyway. There's a metal drop box, and if they just put their tax documents in an envelope and put tax department on there, we will get it. If it's already prepared, meaning they've had a CPA or tax accountant prepare it and they just want to submit it, that'll go in our drop box and we'll process it. If they're wanting the taxes to be prepared, we are requesting individuals to make sure they get those documents to us by March 31st, so we have sufficient time to send them an invoice if there's a balance due, because that balance due is still required to be paid by the April 18th deadline.
So if they put those documents in the Dropbox, you prepare what they owe, you probably keep the documents, correct? And notify them this is what you owe them.
Correct. When we request documents, we try really hard to make sure we request copies, because we do not want to take people's original documents.
Okay.
So we do always ask for copies. If we notice that it looks original, like W-2s look pretty original. If it looks original, we do a good job at making a copy and sending them their originals back.
Okay.
Some people send their entire packet that they get from their tax preparer, and we'll just call them, because at that point it's usually pretty large, and we'll call them, ask them to pick it up. So we just ask for just copies and just get it to us if they want it prepared by us by the March 31st deadline.
So if they have to get it in 18 days before it's actually due for the city to help prepare it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they haven't paid, they have to pay that by April 18th.
Yes.
Now, are there extensions?
We do allow extensions. There is a little confusion on the extension. So an extension is only an extension to file, not an extension to pay. So even if an extension has been, I guess, filed with the federal, we just need a copy of the federal tax form showing that an extension was filed with the IRS. That way we're not sending them a letter saying, hey, you didn't file, because they didn't file because they have an extension. So a copy of that extension is fine. We also have our own extension online if people would like an extension. But again, that extension is just for their paperwork or their documents to be submitted. Payment actually is still required by April 18th. And if payment is not received, we do impose penalties for not paying the tax by the due date.
As we've already mentioned, $25 a month.
So that's actually a late filing fee.
Oh, okay.
So the late filing fee, yes, but if they have a balance due, that's a separate penalty. That's usually 15% is what it's set at now. And then 5%, I think, was our interest rate. They change it every year, and our interest rates are always on our website for people interested in learning about what those interest rates are for any given year.
Samantha, is there anything else we need to let the people know about their income tax?
I would also like to mention estimated tax payments, because that is something that we do enforce, and a lot of people maybe are not aware that it's a requirement. And that is, if the tax is not being withheld for them, they're required to pay it quarterly throughout the year. And if it's not paid quarterly, then there is the 15% penalty on that. So we see that more with people who are self-employed, have rental property, or individuals that work outside of city limits. The individuals that work outside of city limits only get that 0.5% credit with Lebanon. So if we expect them to have a tax liability owed to us of at least $200, then they have to pay it quarterly throughout the year. And we usually get that from their prior year tax return. So if we look at their 2021 tax return, we would estimate their 2022 tax liability to be the same. And if that's over $200, we do send quarterly invoices, and they have to pay it quarterly throughout the year.
Now, if somebody has a question about their city income tax, how can they get those answered?
So we have an email address, and then we also have a phone number. Our email address is incometax@lebanonohio.gov. Ohio is spelled out. And then they can contact us during normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. Our phone number is 513-924-9325. And then they can reach out to us again with any questions they might have. And we also have the secure email where they can upload documents to as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Samantha.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something people don't necessarily like, but it's necessary.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so we appreciate you telling all us about the city income tax. And if you have questions, contact through the website or by phone. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you around town.